All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the first ever Food AI Collab virtual event. I'm really excited to be here. My name is Michael Wolf, and I will be your host for today's conversations. We have two great guests that we'll be talking to today. Dr. Daniel Story, a professor at San Luis Obispo in California, and we also have Kevin Brown, the CEO of Innit. We also, at some point, might get Sarah Robersi, who is the co-founder of the Future Food Institute. A lot of you know Sarah. She's a great friend, and really, I want to tell you kind of the story how this all got started with her in just a second. But she's just coming back from a conference, and so she's in transit. So, as you know, she's such a busy person. So hopefully we can connect with her later. If not, we will certainly have her on the next call. So, my name is Michael Wolf, and like I said, I'm the co-founder of the Spoon, and sitting in my seat as a journalist and someone who writes about food technology, I've watched really over the past couple of years an unprecedented amount of excitement around artificial intelligence, and particularly in how it's going to impact the food system. That's one of the things we've been covering a lot at the Spoon. And so we even had an event on this topic last fall, a lot of excitement there. And so when Sarah approached me and said, "Hey, we should do something together. Let's build this collab where we explore all the different ways in which AI will change the food system," I got very excited about that. And so that's what we did. That's what we're starting to build here. And so it's exciting to have you at the first one. We're hoping to have these virtual meetings, or we will have these virtual meetings every month. And we're going to have some in-person meetings over the course of this year, and we'll have more news on that very soon. So keep track. Join the LinkedIn group, which I will put up a little call to action here for you to look at that. Let me do that right now while we're talking. Oh, and hey, Sarah did join us.
Hey, I'm in.
Sarah, can you hear me?
Yes.
All right. Well,
Nice
I was
to
just
be here.
telling the story of how you emailed me one day and you said, "Hey, we really need to do something about AI and like do a collab where people can learn because it's such an impactful technology and changing the food system from farm to fork." What was your thinking there? I'm sure you're having conversations. You sit in a little different, you have a little different perspective than me because you're doing great work in. Why did you decide that hey, this is something we needed to do?
And why did I decide to ask you to do it together? So I strongly believe that now we need absolutely to bring back values, ethic, and a systemic perspective when we're talking about food. You know how many collisions there are between food and climate, environmental issue, global health and security, war, many challenges we are facing as humanity. And we know how much we have been working in a silo mode. Now AI can expand our horizons, our potentials, but also we need to understand how to bring back the perspective of values within our decision. When we're talking about food, we're talking about the most essential thing, but also we're talking about something that touches many dots in our life at every level, the most important one, security, and at the end, human health. And of course, when we're talking about agri and the adoption of AI in agriculture at every level, even if we're talking about emerging countries or our developed countries, we know how much when we're talking about agriculture, at the end, we are also talking about health as well. So, of course, we at the Future Food Institute, we are very much exposed to all of those reflections, and we want to deep dive into the topic, understanding more and more how much we, food players, and the different role we're playing, even if we are farmers, chefs, food producers, or tech companies working for smart kitchens. Anyway, what's our role and how we can be a positive part of the chain. And of course, AI can be a big ally, but we know we need to train ourselves on many different directions, not only on the skills, but also we need to train ourselves having this kind of perspective. And then I'm very fascinated about our moving fast, also regulations. You know that in Europe, just a few days ago, we had the first document, the first agreement signed by the European Commission about AI. And we know how much and how fast is growing AI everywhere, and the adoption of AI, also the wrong adoption of AI. So I want to reflect and work together with all of you to better understand how we, at the different level, we can help out to advance in the right way, bringing also the elements that we need to advance all together in the right way.
That's great. Yeah, I think no matter what part of the food value chain, as I've talked to people over the past 12 months, there's no doubt that they see artificial intelligence as changing in a very profound way their jobs in their industry. You know, that's at the farm level, at the novel food ingredient development level, at CPG, retail, or all the way to our own plates in our homes and cooking in our homes. So uh, it's just accelerating change more quickly. And so, as you said, there's all sorts of issues to and threads to pull out, whether that's the ethics of this, how this could potentially be disruptive to our industries and our companies, and we just want to explore it from a 360-degree perspective in all angles. And so, between our two communities, I think we can bring some great perspectives here, great points of view, and I'm looking forward to working with you on this, Sarah.
Yeah. And another topic I would love to understand more and more is how we can train youth, because
For
everybody
sure.
is scaring people, saying, okay, we're going to lose your job. No, we're not going to lose our job. We need to invest in developing more and more our creativity and our knowledge to use AI in the proper way, to make sure that AI is not going to be something that is going to kill jobs and opportunities, but it's going to be just something that can make exponential positive impact. So this is the approach I want to have. And of course, we at the Future Food Institute, we are training public administrators, mayors, industry leaders, youth, activists, innovators. So working a lot in training people. And we have been always training not from the top of the classroom, but learning together with our learners, really going always at the edge of what we are looking as the future scenario. This is what we need to co-learn. So what we need to develop our creativity in a way that can really use AI in the proper way, in a way that is going to be positively impactful. So this is, I think, one of the most interesting topic now, and I look forward to hear from our guests from now on.
That's great. Yeah, I mean, that's what I've always loved about your organizations is you roll up your sleeves and you get and kind of work at the very front lines with people who are building the future. And I think we can bring people who are rolling up their sleeves and working with AI and in all its different dimensions and how it's going to impact food. So I'm excited to talk about that. And your point about the workforce and youth is a great segue to our first guest. So I'm going to bring on Dr. Daniel Story. Sarah, thank you so much. We'll hear from you soon. Well,
Thank you.
I always appreciate all you do, and we'll talk to you very soon. Let's bring on Dr. Story.
Thank you. I look forward.
And here we go. We're doing real time control of these. All right, there we are. Dr. Story, let's unmute you. Welcome.
Thank you.
So the reason I wanted to bring you on as a first guest is because there's a project that you're working on, and I got invited to participate in a workshop. I got to go to the great town of San Luis Obispo, where you work at Cal Poly, and I got reached out to work at this workshop or come and contribute to the workshop because people had saw what I'm doing with food and AI. But when I first heard about it, I thought it was really interesting, the project you're working on. You are working on a project that got government funding from the National Science Foundation that examining the ethical and social impacts of AI with kitchens and robots, et cetera. And I thought that was just a really fascinating project. And so when I went down there and sat with this great group of different industry experts, it was just a really educational, insightful couple of days. But I want to step back and ask you to tell us about what is this project? Tell people, from your perspective, what are you guys working on?
Yeah, sure. So as you mentioned, this is a project funded by the National Science Foundation. And the basic purpose of the project is to examine or try to think about and anticipate the potential social or aesthetic or religious or ethical impacts of various forms of culinary automation that we can anticipate in the near or long-term future. Basically, there is no academic literature on this at all within philosophy, within ethics, within sociology, within religious studies. So, yeah, I mean, as you said, I mean, part of the point of this project is to get people together, interdisciplinary folks, stakeholders from various different places, and jumpstart a conversation on this, which will be useful as we try to develop these technologies and implement these technologies in cooking in various spheres. So it's not only focused on AI, but includes AI. So really, any form of anticipated culinary automation, that's the way I like to put it, including like robotics technology, or, as you say, AI technology, would fall under the umbrella of what we're interested in the project.
Awesome. And you yourself, you look at aesthetics and ethics from a kind of a disciplinary perspective, and you're digging into a lot of research, talking to different folks in the food value chain about what they are thinking. What are some of the early gleanings from your research? What are you hearing? Maybe some of the reasons for excitement, and maybe one or two reasons for concern about the impact of AI on food.
Yeah, so I mean, my research, as you said, is focused mostly on the potential aesthetic impacts of, especially extensive, sort of fairly futuristic regimes of automation. So I'm interested in how, if we remove humans from large swaths of cooking or from you know creation of food, uh, how that might affect the value for eaters, of their food, or the pleasure that eaters get out of their food. And I mean, one, I think, finding, I guess, if you want to put it that way, that I've come upon is that, look, I mean, if you remove humans from the cooking process too extensively, then a lot of what contributes to a valuable eating experience or a valuable drinking experience is going to be lost. So, I mean, I guess one like takeaway from of that is that, look, if we are envisioning a future where fewer and fewer humans are participating in cooking, and I think maybe not folks in this call, but a lot of people in industry do sort of envision a future like that, then we need to kind of think intentionally about what the likely aesthetic cost might be, and how this technology might be implemented in a way to minimize the negative aesthetic costs, and perhaps, I don't know, enhance the positive aesthetic cost. So, I mean, I think things to be optimistic about. I mean, first of all, there are types of automation which you were kind of alluding to, Mike, in the initial introductory material, where um, a human being's capacities are enhanced, and the types of AI that contribute to human creativity. And I think from my point of view, those forms of automation aren't worrying ethically or aesthetically. The From my point of view, the sort of concerning types of technology are what's often called human out of the loop automation, or human out of the loop um, automatic processes, where the automation removes human beings from playing any meaningful role in the you know in whatever process you're talking about. And when we're talking about a side of human culture and a side of human value like cooking, where human input, not just raw sensations, but the human input into the creation of the product, um, is a large part of the source of why that product is worthwhile, then I think we got to be careful about how we uh, design and you know, distribute this and implement this technology. Anyway,
Yeah, no, that's great. And early on in the world of art, right? So if you look at the art world for the past 25 years, it's been in some ways hugely transformed by the arrival of digital tools. And I would say there's been an explosion of creativity, people using things like Adobe Suite, etc. I didn't start to get worried until like you think about like the last year or so. If you look at the art world, all of a sudden online is just flooded with AI powered art. Tools like Midjourney, etc. Um, so I think there's an opportunity to kind of enhance people's creativity, and when you give them new tool sets, as we digitize the food system. But is there like a worry about the mid-journeying, I guess, of culinary arts, by these tools?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, this goes back to the human in the loop, human out of the loop distinction I was making earlier. A lot of the, just kind of pursue the analogy, a lot of the digital technology that a decade ago or more was introduced to, enhance the artistic process was designed to meaningfully involve human input and actually required that, obviously. I mean, couldn't use Photoshop to automatically generate an image 10 or 20 years ago. But yeah, a lot of the technology we see now, a lot of the generative AI technology we see now doesn't really, I mean, there's this prompt engineering thing, but it doesn't require much meaningful human input. And like I said, one worry you might have about the direction the culinary automation technology is going is that it's assumed to be desirable that humans can be involved as little as possible, maybe for economic reasons, maybe for convenience reasons. And there are obviously benefits of that potential reduction in time spent, or time that you need to spend cooking, reduction in costs and so forth. But yeah, I mean, the drawbacks are going to be the loss of that creative spirit and its expression in food.
I do want to encourage the audience. I've seen all these great people chipping in from different parts of the world. We have Mexico City, Munich, Helsinki, San Diego. If you have a question for Daniel or Kevin, feel free to drop it in the chat. I'll be keeping an eye on that. We'll do some, if there's some good questions now, we'll get them to Daniel, but also we might, if we have time, we'll do a Q&A at the end with both of them. And so just, if you're thinking of, as you hear Daniel talk, a question, feel free to drop it into the chat. It's interesting. One of the things you and I, Daniel, talked about in the kind of the pre-chat, and I think I told the story at the workshop, is one of the early pioneers in the space that I saw doing interesting things is a operator of a restaurant in the San Diego area, and he had basically acquired the restaurant. It's a pizza restaurant, fully analog restaurant. It had been in the community for 20 years, and he's just started bringing in automation and artificial intelligence to kind of streamline the pizza making. And essentially he moved from a restaurant with 20 employees to one that has 4 or 5, and it's largely automated, and it's become kind of a ghost kitchen in a sense to create food for the community. That resulted in one of the former workers leaving and being very upset about it. She wasn't necessarily fired because he allowed anyone who wanted to stay there to stay, but she was commenting on social media saying how he's using automation and AI to create food, and saying how this is a bad thing. So the reason I bring up that anecdote is I think it's worth exploring what ultimately the impacts will be on employees as you start to use AI to enhance their jobs. I'm like you. I don't necessarily think early on we'll see complete replacement, but it has to be a worry for some folks as expertise can be replaced by computers. So what are your thoughts early on your own, and maybe early gleanings from your research?
Yeah, I mean, it's a good question. I mean, one trend that we often see in industries that, where you have automation injected into them to direct workers in their day-to-day job, is that workers have to rely less and less on their own capacities and their own knowledge. And more, it tends to happen that workers, in order to carry out their day-to-day activities, even if those activities are in some sense pretty complex, they just have to follow simple rules and let themselves be guided by the algorithm or the AI. And I mean, that obviously from a managerial point of view, that can be a good thing because it can lead to streamlining, efficiency, and predictability in terms of worker output. But I mean, arguably, a lot of times that also leads to a form of alienation because workers um, are essentially performing rote activities and aren't putting anything of themselves, anything significant of themselves into the activity they're performing all day, and don't have to draw upon, you know, distinctively human capacities or hard-won knowledge or anything like that. And I think, that's I think at least in the short and medium term, that's a real worry for workers. Not that they're going to be fully replaced in this industry or really any other industry, but rather that, I mean, their jobs are going to become more um, menial and less interesting. And so, yeah, I mean, I think in the long term, we might see a lot of humans replaced, both in this industry and in many others by automation and robots. But I think in the short and medium term, it's going to be something a little bit subtler, but no less worrying from my point of view.
Yeah, and obviously that brings about all sort of like societal conversations we're going to need to have around, universal basic income, et cetera, as automation and AI take hold of more parts of different industries. We are getting some interesting questions. I just want to get to a couple now. Daniel, Aditi asks, what do you mean by aesthetic impacts of AI in food? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Well, so by aesthetic impacts, I'm just referring to the pleasure or beauty or broadly value that an eater experiences when they are consuming food or drinking something. And I mean, part of my research on this is all occurring at a very high abstract level where I'm just trying to develop I mean, there's virtually or actually literally no academic literature on this. So it's kind of like a first step towards developing that, but trying to develop a framework which would enable us to think effectively about how in the long term, replacing humans in the food production process might undermine the, again, pleasure or beauty or generally value that someone experiences in eating. And the reason why this is possible, I think, is that, I mean, in a lot of cases, not in all cases of eating food. I mean, if you're eating McDonald's, this is probably not true. But in a lot of cases, when you're eating food, the value of your experience is not wholly reducible to the raw sensations, the chemical properties of the food and how those relate to your senses. Rather, part of the experience is built upon other things, cognitive factors like your beliefs about where the food came from or who made it. And once you realize that, you can see how radically changing the production process, another way of putting it is the historical properties of the particular piece of food you are eating could have an effect, maybe positive, but in a lot of cases likely negative on your experience. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. Here's a question from Schubert Ho, a local restaurateur in my neck of the woods in the Seattle area. He says, given that there's no educational literature yet for food AI, he feels that inserting curriculum into culinary programs can be an effective way to train the next generation of leadership to spread its AI food seed into commercial applications, essentially kind of using young people to build knowledge around this into commercial applications. How do you see a forward leap in AI food tech providing much higher consistency in employee management? Does that make sense?
Well, I mean, the last question, I think, yeah, makes sense. As I was saying, I mean, we see what it's called in other industries, algorithmic management. I mean, we see algorithmic management being increasingly implemented in lots of industries. I mean, most famously in gig work and in warehouses like Amazon
Yeah.
warehouses. And there, I mean, the main advantage is from a managerial point of view, are increases in efficiency and increases in reliability, because you can, in a very fine-grained way, um, manage employees without incurring a lot of additional managerial costs. And actually, I mean, unfortunately, this often also means that, managers don't need to hire as skilled laborers or train laborers or spend as much time investing in laborers, because they can just essentially surveil and evaluate and direct employees at no cost by using this technology. So rather than relying upon employees' internal knowledge or skills to do their job well, you know, you can sort of outsource that regulative task to an algorithm rather than the employee themselves. And yeah, so I mean, I think there are major advantages in terms of this technology in, and from a managerial point of view, and ensuring consistency across multiple kitchens. I mean, some of the people in the industry I've talked to have touted as one of the main advantages of this sort of managerial technology in cooking is that it makes it easier for chefs to scale, to like increase the amount of restaurants that a single chef or a single owner has, because you can better control consistency across those restaurants, where without this technology that would be very difficult, but with the technology you can, in a very fine-grained way, control people's behavior. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. There's a startup that actually is using computer vision to record chef's creation of food and kind of documenting it essentially, and then taking it and then transferring that into different specific geographic locations where they'll basically use automation to recreate food using their techniques. So even at the
Chef?
yeah. So even at the higher end, we're seeing people trying to embrace automation and AI to recreate the culinary arts of like a really skilled worker. Super interesting. I think we have time for one more question for you, and then we'll get to Kevin, and we'll bring you back for more questions. But one of the questions that someone asked is, how do you see AI in food potentially being used to resolve hunger in a deeper way, right? So there's a big challenge with global hunger. We're not going to be able to necessarily feed 10 billion people. There's always certain people that are in food insecurity situations. Do you see AI and automation as a way to potentially be a way to solve that partially or in some way?
Yeah, I mean, great question. I'm not at all an expert in these issues, so I can't speak in a very specific way to it, except to say that, I mean, depends on what type of AI we're talking about. If we're talking about AI that is just developing new recipes or helping someone cook, I mean, I guess there's an argument to be made that that might make certain sorts of food more accessible to people. But I mean, I suspect that, if we're talking about starvation or hunger in Africa, let's say, the problem is not that you can't find people to cook or you can't find new recipes. The problem has more to do with, distribution of food on a larger scale. Now, AI might be useful for solving those sorts of problems, but probably not the specific sort of AI that a lot of people are interested in the discussions that I've been a part of, which are mainly like the use of AI to, again, design recipes or run a kitchen or something along those lines. But I just don't know anything about that issue, really, so I can't speak more to it.
All right. Well, I do think it was a thoughtful answer. I appreciate it, Daniel. We are going to put you on the side stage for now. This has been great, and we'll bring you back for some last Q&A at the final few minutes. And we're going to bring on Kevin Brown, the CEO of Innit. Kevin, how are you doing? I'm going to unmute you here. There you go.
Doing great. Great to be here.
Thanks for coming on. I think I've known you now for almost a decade, because you're one of the OG companies that are building the future kitchen, the smart kitchen. And I remember those very early days having conversations with you about using computer vision to kind of help create guidance systems for consumers to help them cook better. So first, tell really quickly people about Innit, and then how you started in the early days of Innit, maybe using some forms of AI.
Yeah, well, it's been a fun journey knowing you and sort of seeing all of the changes here. So, we started the company, and launched it at the Smart Kitchen Summit. So, from the very beginnings, and from the very beginnings of our company, we were working on two tracks. One is going deep on food tech and nutrition and recipes and meal planning and the whole cooking journey all the way to the kitchen. But at the same time, we were doing quite a bit of work on AI. So we were building some of the first computer vision models in the food industry. Then moved on to things like machine learning to match the right foods in your basket as you're shopping, or predicting which things you would want to buy. So we've been sort of working these in parallel, and the last couple of years have been pretty breakthrough. So our company is a food intelligence company. So we power our clients, big grocers, food brands, and even health companies like Roche, with solutions for healthy eating. And so we're really excited about some of the potential in what's coming right now.
So the evolution of the company, I think, has really been impacted, I think, by the emergence of generative AI. So first, for the layman, can you just describe maybe the difference between traditional kind of computer vision and machine learning algorithms, and then what we're seeing now with generative AI, just kind of what the difference is?
Yeah, it's really which problems they're good at solving. So something like computer vision can be a real breakthrough in terms of if you want to identify like what's in my fridge, or let me look at this plate and understand things about it. Let me look at an ingredient. There's a lot of places that we started to explore where this can and will help in the future. And so some of that was kind of forward-looking R&D. Some of it is now coming in and being used today. But that's a fairly sort of narrow recognize something and then do something. With generative AI, so we started using it to solve some of our own problems, in terms of scaling. How do you scale thousands of recipes? How do you personalize things? And what's really been exciting is that this unlocks for the consumer. They can just say what they want, instead of having to go into an app or a website and check a bunch of boxes and figure out how to use some tools and try to search things. They can just say what they want. And our job is to let the AI does a great job of pattern matching and coming up with something creative. But what our company has developed is something called validators. So this is a new architecture for what we would call trusted AI. And so what we're doing is we're taking a decade's worth of R&D that we've been doing for nutrition, for product scoring, for health, for personalization, e-commerce, all of these different engines. And we're marrying them with the AI. So what this does is essentially create safety rails. So you've heard about hallucinations and a lot of the problems. I did a search on ChatGPT and said, hey, give me healthy meal ideas for kids that are peanut free and low sodium. The first recommendation that came back was lettuce wraps with peanut sauce. Right. So, there's a tremendous amount. We're very optimistic that, people can just say, hey, make me a meal plan and, go buy my groceries and make it healthier. If people are able to delegate some of this cognitive load, there's 100 little decisions that can be made in their benefit to let the AI go find the low sodium tomato sauce to put in your recipe, right? That could be something that really helps, but only if you can trust it. And so what we've been doing is making this architecture so that these AI technologies can be safe and can be trusted. So we're kind of trust but verify, so we can do the pre-processing and post-processing and have an algorithmic deterministic engine that's kind of fact checking as we go.
To frame it in a technology kind of a technology framing for that could be essentially, the base kind of foundation of a lot of what we're seeing now in generative AIs are these large language models built by like OpenAI and Google and Microsoft. And that's where when we're using ChatGPT, that's where we're interacting with, and we're asking questions in a very human style format, and it's giving human style format responses back. But as you said, there's a lot of problems with it. There's a lot of hallucinations. It's oftentimes not caught up to the most current kind of what's happening in the world. Also, domain knowledge can be kind of weak. And so you're essentially building an intelligence layer on top of that provides, basically makes it much more, food intelligent and food knowledgeable, right? So you talked about this translator essentially. So when you talk about food-centric applications, whether that's for recipe guidance systems in the consumer or commercial kitchen, or a health-centric application for someone who may be in a potential be worried about type 2 diabetes, your food intelligence layer kind of makes the answers more knowledgeable. Is that right?
That's right. So yeah, we see a continuum. So on one end, we're working, for example, we're really proud to be working with Roche Diabetes. So we're
Right.
powering their healthy eating for people with type 2 diabetes. It's now #1 in France, and we're looking at how that continues to spread. And so it's really that daily companion that can help you pick which yogurt on the shelf is going to be a better fit with you. How do you make the meal plan? How's that tie into activity? We even tie into glucometers. So for the very health centric, we've done a lot of work there. And we have a science committee. The head of our science committee was dean of the Harvard School of Public Health. So we've really tried to bring in all of the experts, all of the science-backed, to be able to deal with very serious health issues. In the U.S., for example, 38 million people have been diagnosed with diabetes, and there's 100 million with prediabetes. So it's not really a niche market. There's the folks that we're helping in this kind of health context, but we want to bring that intelligence to everyone. Everyone has an interest in healthy eating. So there's so much complexity. People have different diets. They're paleo-pescatarian. They've got 7 different allergies. The kids like this, they don't like that. There's a lot of complexity that people deal with, and there's an opportunity to really help cut through some of that and just have better food decisions, better food inspirations.
Let's do some future casting extrapolation of where that goes, right? So I think one of the obvious applications of AI, generative AI in our lives around food applications is obviously this personalized nutrition coach. Where does that ultimately go? One of the challenges in kind of the medical system is there's just not enough manpower. It's a huge bureaucracy. But at our event in October, there was kind of people started talking about the human, or I guess the virtual doctor. So do you think ultimately this becomes the first line of defense around people's questions and guidance towards nutrition and ultimately their health? And where does that go?
Well, there's an opportunity to democratize, expert advice and have it personalized, and that's something that's been hard up till now. We've been doing a lot of the work on the engines and the algorithms, for example, to be able to score, across millions of products, and so you can pick, which is the right yogurt for me, or which is the right food, and you can now do it automatically. So as you're going and clicking on a recipe, it can filter on all of your health concerns and automatically put the right thing in your cart. So we've been working on that piece of the technology, and when you marry that with a natural language system that people can just talk to, people don't need to know all the details. They just want to say, hey, my doctor said I should have a heart healthy recipes for my family, and to help me with that. And there's 17 different inputs to that most people kind of can't keep up with or can't track. And by the way, they keep changing. There's new research that look, high fat sometimes is good for people with diabetes in their yogurt. So there's a whole set of complexity that people struggle with. And so what we want to do is be able to take their high level intents. They say, hey, make me a meal plan for the week. Trying to lose weight, we've got, Tuesday night is soccer practice. So, it's got to be quick. Friday night is date night. So, let's make it, special. And then Saturday night, we've got the in-laws coming over, and they're dairy free and gluten free. Help, right? What do I make? And, these are the interactions that you're going to have talking to your grocery store, talking to your favorite food brands, people are going to have this kind of assistant functionality every single day. And if we can embed, better health, better, dealing with their allergies, et cetera, then they don't have to think about all of those details. They don't have to squint at the labels, and try to figure it out. I mean, we talked about if you have a corn allergy, there's over 300 different chemical names that mean corn, right? So this stuff is just too hard for a lot of people to keep up with.
So I do want to get some questions for you, Kevin. There are some already out there that I can point your direction. So people, if you have questions for Kevin specifically, put them in the chat. One of the, I think, worries of people around these new types of virtualized services powered by AI, like maybe like a virtualized health or nutrition coach is just their own personal data. And there's a lot of skepticism around big technology nowadays. And so what would you say to them? If you're kind of building the underlying technology that ultimately creates this personalized nutrition coach, how can they be sure that like information about their dietary makeup and their health isn't put out on a server somewhere that, that could be accessed?
Yeah, so this is a really important question. So we've worked with a lot of our big customers, but in Europe, in the U.S., and we've had to deal with things like GDPR, some of the privacy regulations, and so one of the things that we've designed into our system is it's kind of decoupled. So we can come in and help one of our partners offer these kind of services, but all of the customer records stay inside the client company. So they're essentially handing anonymized requests, and we don't know if it's one person asking for 10 things or 10 people asking one each. And so we've tried to simplify the integration process and compliance and all of that. We got to pass all those security tests. So we've already kind of built in a layer where we're kind of decoupling the identity from how the system operates. And then there's other, technical discussions you can have around security or privacy or anonymization. But it's an important topic. But, I think people are putting a lot of data out there today as is. And so it's important for, whoever's handling that data to be very thoughtful about how it's being used and a lot of transparency to that.
So this isn't so much a question as a thought, but I think you can riff on it. Matt Grisafi, I hope I said that right. Matt, I apologize if I didn't. He says, taking it a step further, completely personalized fresh meal delivery services won't be too far away. This has huge implications for the grocery industry. And I know that you have worked early days of Innit, like you guys were working with potentially creating personalized meal kits. I can only imagine how AI could potentially power that and make that more of a reality. So what are your thoughts here? Do you think AI ultimately can power more personalized, meal kits and meal delivery services? And how do you think that'll be seeded into the grocery industry?
So we've got all the Lego building blocks done. They're all working today. So we know how to do the personalization down to a product level to score this particular product and compare the ones that are on the shelf in your store. We know how to go from a recipe and map all of the right product and ingredients in the right quantities and put them in your cart for you automatically. We know how to then integrate your diet or your preferences, into a combination of these new, kind of natural language interfaces, but with, some safety rails on it. So we've got the pieces. And we're just, part of it is just the consumer, sort of behavior and learning, catching up with what's going to be available. So today we can essentially create a personalized diet for you, tag it with all of your different health concerns, pick the right groceries, automatically put them in your cart, have them show up at your door, and then have step-by-step cooking, instructions that are tailored to your, particular dish that was invented. We can, either take existing recipes or we can generate new ones. One of the things we found in a study that we did was about 16% of AI generated recipes have at least one serious flaw. And so one of the things that we've been working on is a very specialized new validator that can answer the question, is it going to taste good? So we can actually create ratings that are plus minus, a half star from what human ratings are, just looking at the recipes and automatically integrate that. So I think there's a future where you can say, hey, I want something with salmon tonight, and make it, I don't know, spicy Asian something. Want brown rice or noodles? Let's do brown rice. That's healthier. Go. And and it'll tailor something, and it knows that you don't like cilantro. And so it's gonna, substitute mint or whatever the the kind of. But this is coming pretty quickly, and if we can put the safety rails on it, and then this personalized meal kit kind of showing up at your doorstep, it's right now.
Chef GG has this great comment. Hey, there goes personal chef jobs. I don't want to be too glib about like saying, hey, well, the technology industry would say. You could use AI as like your kind of augmentation, give you a superpower. I do think that's true to a certain extent, right? I do think like, hey, those who are embracing AI today can probably be a lot better at their job than those who are completely ignoring it. Like if I want to augment my knowledge around potential ways to create personalized meals for a certain person or a certain type of archetype or like diet type, I think generative AI is going to be awesome for that. I don't want to make this conversation about lost jobs, but we'll talk about that. Do you think this is something in the near term that like people who are personal chefs can embrace and do a great job, help them really augment their job? What are your thoughts there?
So I think it's both. I think for the consumer, we're going to help them augment, all of the food decisions, all of their cooking. And if we can, help every family when it's cooking, have, healthier, better tasting food with less stress, saving money, reducing food waste. Those are all, I think, positive things that we can do for those people. If someone is a personal chef that has clients, those clients probably appreciate their skill in preparing and cooking, and they get the great flavor when they saute it, and they're doing a valuable service. So, if that personal chef now uses, additional tools to come up with inspiration or to chat with the family about what they want to have, I don't think that precludes any of those existing functions, and skills. I think that, cooking things is a real skill. I love to cook, and it's not the same when person A and person B cook something. There could be a lot of differences, and so again, there's going to be some disruptions for sure, and I'm as concerned about them as anyone. I want to make sure that everyone has the ability to do things that are meaningful, that they love, that they can have their inputs to, and we're just trying to make sure that as the technology does arrive, that it's really democratized and accessible to everyone, and it's accessible in a safe way.
We had a great comment from Luna. Says maybe we should use grandmothers to input the food information into AI to make sure it's at least delicious. Hopefully, Kevin, you're actually out there interviewing lots of grandmas, and I think Matt Grisofi called it Nana GPT. So maybe we can make Grandma GPT.
I love it. In fact, we do specialized training where we're picking which chefs and other things can go into things. And generative AI does a good job of being able to pattern match all of the grandmas if it's published out there. That's potentially being put into the training models. And then you can do emphasis of maybe sort of selecting a set of inputs that you want to enhance. But I think that there's a lot to be said there about hey, let's harness all of that great cooking knowledge that might get lost over the generations.
One last question, then we'll bring Daniel back on for maybe a few more questions. Ivan de Murard says that personalized nutrition programs with glucose monitors is an interesting and huge market. Sadly, it's a statement, but I do think it leads to a question of we've seen a startup, January AI. They did their app where essentially it takes a picture of your food and then does a prediction on the impact of what it will be on your blood sugar. So people who are in danger of being, type 2 diabetes, they can start using the app to actually predict what will happen on their blood sugar. So predictions and kind of looks forward into like your needs around personalized nutrition seems like an obvious potential use for AI. Is that something you're thinking about a lot?
Yeah, this is an important part of we're going to have more and more data, right? We're going to have sensors on us. We're going to have sensors on our food. We're going to, and what do you do with all this new information to just have a better outcome? And so, blood sugar is something that, it's, not just for diabetics. It affects, how you're processing food, how you feel, when you overeat and then you feel lethargic. That's the same system that you could tune and do a better job at. So I think that these will be exciting. When they can put it into your Apple Watch or whatever, I think that will be sort of more democratizing. Right now, it's you have a patch but the CGMs are getting very small, very good. And I know friends of mine that are athletes that are wearing them to understand their body and what's happening. So I think all of this is kind of converging.
Welcome back, Daniel. Andrew Rosenblum had an interesting comment. He says there's an aesthetic issue with that you were just talking about. Someone might say, I cooked a recipe that my bot gave me versus I cooked a Hetty McKinnon recipe. A lot of it's framing, but if you're like in the culinary world, do you think a lot of people may be using the tools, but ultimately it might become like something they don't want to talk about as much because, hey, the world of culinary is so much about personalities and kind of personal crafting. If you're using these tools, does it become somewhat of an issue around your kind of personal brand, if you will?
Well, I have two quick comments. I'd love to hear Daniel's thought. So one is, there's actually an opportunity for it to be my recipe. Because I come up with an idea and I don't know how to turn it into a full recipe, but it's my inspiration of I want to cook it with this and this, and I want to change this thing. People usually don't use mint, but I want to use mint. And now it comes up with fills in the details, and so it's a Kevin recipe to a certain extent. Kind of co-authored, if you will. So that's one. The other observation is that one of the things that we do with our clients is we can train on specific information. So if Hetty, Chef Hetty is someone that you love, that might be something where the inspirations that you get can be trained on that that kind of ethic of cooking. And so there's going to be a lot of hybrids and different sort of perspectives, but I agree that we should not be losing the human element. This should be something that's either amplifying it or allowing it to tailor itself to me.
At the Basque, so Yasser from the Basque Culinary Center is on listening in, and they say that they are using AI tools for creativity with the students. So I do think it is kind of a good starting place for brainstorming and getting ideas to help you kind of figure out ways to take directions to take things. Dr. Story, when you think about using tools in kind of culinary do you think it's a way to maybe enhance people's creativity? If they can give it a prompt and then they could take that and run with it themselves? What are your thoughts there?
Yeah, sure. I think so. I mean, I think the technology Kevin's describing sounds really cool and very, very useful. I mean, I had the same thought that Andrew did. I mean, I agree that there is this interesting idea that you might use this technology to co-author a recipe, and that certainly it might be a catalyst for your own new ideas. Also, yeah, I mean, I think a lot of the times people don't really care where the recipe came from. I mean, sometimes they do. And in those situations, I would think that, yeah, some of the pleasure or, again, aesthetic value that people get out of what they're eating has to do with their beliefs or their knowledge about, the provenance of the recipe that they used. But look, I mean, in those situations, as Kevin was pointing out, presumably you can choose not to use the generative AI and just look for Hetty McKinnon's recipe. And I don't think, at least in the short term or the medium term, having this technology is going to mean that it's impossible to access other sources of inspiration or information about your recipes. Now, I mean, there is a world you can imagine where this technology is so ubiquitous that people forget how or lose the ability to access other sources of information, and that's worrying. But it's not, I think, inherent in the technology, or the technological space that we're at now, and that we can envision in the near future.
Kevin, I don't know if you heard, we briefly mentioned Cloud Chef earlier, but they're this organization that's essentially trying to document and record all the moves of chefs, and then maybe take that knowledge and create essentially a library. Then you could play it back in different locations. What are your thoughts about that? I mean, obviously they're doing that as a startup. Do you think that's a model that will be, say, widely adopted if we're looking at the future, if there's lots of distributed ghost kitchens in different points of presence around the world? Do you think these may be kind of just playing back the moves of chefs using kind of technology that's been able to understand the nuances of their different cooking techniques? Or is this something that no, it's more just, hey, it'll be training material for people who are actually doing it themselves?
Well, generation 1.0 of this was cookbooks, right? A famous chef, develops a technique. They write it down. They sell you a cookbook. There's a printing press that and prints out thousands of them, and you purchase one, and now you can use it across the planet and and transfer human learning. So, I see that there is somewhat of a continuum of people are now using computers to do stuff like that, and in some more sophisticated ways. But I'd say there's a benefit to sharing human knowledge and be able to bring that. And then, there's just always the dystopian side of it of, there's only one creative chef that anyone listens to and everyone else is a robot. I'm hoping we don't end up there.
It's an interesting, I mean, there is a democratization potential there, right? Like, hey, getting access to food that is an analog of like a famous chef because we've been able to record it and we could play it back in my little town. It's exciting. Maybe we could create better tasting food than I might be able to get, but yeah, there's things we have to guard against as we create the rules and guardrails as a society, and just kind of making sure that kind of that knowledge base among humans actually lives on. So I think that's kind of one of the bigger concerns we'll be tussling with over the next few years. We are at about time. I know I want to keep it tight for everyone who's dialing in, but also Kevin and Dan, you probably have jobs to get to, running companies and teaching folks. So I really appreciate both of you coming on. You guys both have this deep well of knowledge, and within your respective lenses that you look at the world of food. And it was a great conversation. It's been a bunch of chatter in the chat. This is what I love about Crowdcast. People just having a conversation, working over the things you guys are saying. So I think if you guys want to look at that, do so. For both of you, before we go, for people who want to know more about your companies, Kevin Brown, where can people learn about Innit, and then maybe if they want to get a hold of you?
So, I'm Kevin at innit.com. You can go to innit.com and get, a little bit of an overview, but there's a lot of the stuff that we haven't, published there that's kind of cutting edge, coming out soon. So we have some announcements coming out, working with some partners on stuff. And so, really, thanks again for having me. I really applaud this new AI collab and this community coming together to talk. So I really look forward to keeping the conversation going.
Yeah, thanks for being an inaugural speaking guest. That has been awesome. Daniel, where can people learn more about your work and maybe even get a hold of you?
Yeah, I mean, you can just Google my name. I have a website. If you're interested in the NSF project I was mentioning, you can Google Ethics in Emerging Sciences Group at Cal Poly, and that'll pull up a website which will have information about, among other things, this NSF project. I mean, as I said, the paper that I've written that's in press, and I think it's the only academic paper that's ever been written on this topic. So it's not out yet, but if people want to see it, I guess you could email me. I'm happy to share it.
Awesome. Yeah, and I will. Someone drop Kevin's information in there. I will drop a link to your research project work, Daniel, into the chat, so folks can just find it there in just a minute. But thank you guys, and everyone who wants to join the next one. I'm going to work some magic here. Actually, I'm going to do another call to action. Here is a link to register for our next event. Just showed up at the bottom. We are talking on April 18th with Chris Young. Kevin, I think you know Chris. He was a co-author of Modernist Cuisine, and we'll be talking about the impact of AI on culinary gastronomy and cooking. And we'll have another guest as well. But we have a great one with Chris Young being there. So please register for that if you want to see the next conversation. Kevin, Daniel, thank you so much, and we'll talk to everyone soon.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Mike.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye. There we go. Bye, everyone.